Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're getting into a pretty fascinating story. It's all about ice cream, millions of dollars, and, those incredibly high stakes choices that come with building a business from the absolute ground up. Think about it. Every major brand you interact with literally started with one fundamental decision: how to legally structure their dream. And honestly, the form of business ownership you choose can quite literally dictate whether you become a billionaire or lose everything you own.
Okay, let's dive into this first section, the ice cream men, from hippies to business moguls.
So, to really understand this, let's look at two ex hippies who just had this immense passion for social activism: Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield. You probably just know them as Ben and Jerry. Their journey is kind of wild. Ben loved ice cream so much as a kid that he'd smash cookies and candies into it, and he actually ended up as a high school ice cream truck driver. Oh, and he dropped out of college twice. Jerry, on the other hand, went the pre-med route hoping to be a doctor, but pivoted right back to his love of food after getting rejected from med school. They had originally met on a junior high track team, and their paths ended up reuniting 14 years later.
Right, and this is where the magic happens. To actually get their skills up to par, they took a $5 correspondence course. Yeah, $5 on making ice cream from Penn State. With that little certificate in hand and their life savings of $8,000, they opened up a shop in a renovated gas station in Burlington, Vermont. But before they could even scoop that first cone, they hit a wall. Every massive business, no matter how humble the start, faces a fundamental legal question. How exactly should we structure this ownership?
Which brings us to Section 2, solo versus shared ownership, the very first major founder decision. Imagine you're in Ben and Jerry's shoes for just a second here. You've got an idea, you have a tiny bit of capital, and you need to set up shop. The very first fork in the road is deciding, do you want to own this business completely by yourself or bring someone else along for the ride? Now, a sole proprietorship, that gives you absolute, complete control. You make every call, and crucially, you keep every single penny of the profits. It's just taxed as your personal income. But, well, Ben and Jerry couldn't really do that because there were two of them, right? So they opted for a general partnership. This let them pool that precious $8,000 and combine their totally different talents. Sure, it brought shared responsibility, but it also meant they had to share the decision-making and, of course, share those hard-earned profits.
So the crucial point here is this concept of unlimited liability. And guys, this is the terrifying reality for both sole proprietorships and general partnerships. It literally means the business and the owners are legally the exact same entity. If your business fails, or defaults on a massive loan, or worst case, gets sued because someone slips and falls in your shop, your personal assets are totally on the line. They can come after your personal bank account, your car, even your house, just to settle the business's debts. No safety net whatsoever. Moving on to Section 3, the corporate leap, scaling up and raising capital.
Now, despite that massive risk of unlimited liability hanging over them, Ben and Jerry's partnership thrived. It was a huge hit. But about 5 years in, they hit a ceiling. They needed to expand and build a $2 million manufacturing facility. And, you can't exactly swipe a personal credit card for $2 million. So to raise that kind of capital, Ben and Jerry's made a huge move. They transformed into a corporation. By incorporating, they suddenly got limited liability, meaning finally their personal assets were shielded if the company went under. Plus, they could now sell shares of stock to actually raise that $2 million. And because they were so fiercely dedicated to their local community, they initially offered the stock exclusively to Vermont residents. Get this, 1 in every 100 Vermont families actually bought shares.
Now, you might be thinking, since you hear about corporations all the time on the news, that they make up most of the economy. But look at this. In reality, they account for a surprisingly small slice of all U.S. businesses, just about 17.5%. The vast majority, nearly 72%, are actually sole proprietorships run by everyday individuals. And this brilliantly illustrates a massive twist when we talk about where the money actually is. Despite being way fewer in number, corporations generate a staggering 82% of all business revenues in the United States. It's wild. Those sole proprietorships that made up 72% of the businesses, they generate less than 4% of the revenue. So basically, once a business reaches a substantial size, incorporating becomes almost mandatory. But hey, corporations aren't perfect. Far from it. Aside from a super heavy burden of regulations and the sheer expense to set them up, they suffer from something called double taxation. That means the corporation's profits are taxed, and then when they pay out dividends to shareholders, those are taxed again. Plus, you run into the agency problem. See, because the people who manage a corporation aren't always the people who actually own it, their interests can seriously clash.
A manager might prioritize their own career advancement or salary over the actual stockholders' profits. It's a classic conflict of interest.
Let's look at Section 4, Best of Both Worlds, Modern Alternatives for Founders. Let's move to this next concept and see how this builds. What if you're a modern founder watching this explainer right now and you want that sweet liability protection, but absolutely no double taxation? While the limited liability company, or LLC, is a brilliantly designed compromise. It gives owners the limited liability of a corporation, so your personal house and car are safe, but it applies the single taxation of a partnership. You're just taxed at the personal level, completely avoiding double taxation. It's really no wonder LLCs have just exploded in popularity since all 50 states officially recognized them back in the late 90s. Now, another alternative, especially if you're totally mission-driven, is the not-for-profit corporation. These orgs focus on charitable, religious, educational, or scientific purposes rather than just chasing financial gain. And because they serve a public purpose, they're completely exempt from paying income taxes, and donors even get tax deductions for their contributions. There are over 1.5 million of these in the U.S. alone, ranging from your local church all the way to massive entities like the United Way, the Red Cross, or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
And that brings us to Section 5. Mergers and hostile takeovers, the climax of the business life cycle.
Let's fast forward a bit. Say you've picked your structure, you've survived those grueling early years, and your company becomes wildly successful. What happens next? Well, we enter the climax of the business life cycle. Here, growth isn't just about hiring more people, it's about combining forces through mergers and acquisitions. A merger is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Two companies willingly coming together to form a brand new entity. The logic here is basically that 1 + 1 = 3. Like back in 2005, US Airways and America West merged. By teaming up, they created an airline with a massive footprint, reaching way more markets than either one could have done on its own.
And acquisition, on the other hand, is when one company just simply buys another outright. There's no new company formed, the acquired company just gets absorbed. We saw this when the telecom giant T-Mobile acquired Sprint to create the new T-Mobile. Or, when Adidas bought Reebok for $3.8 billion just to get a stronger foothold against their massive rival Nike. So why spend billions to do this? It's all about strategic advantages. You might acquire a company to get complementary products, to enter brand new markets, or to realize incredible cost savings, which the corporate world loves to call synergies. When Pfizer bought Pharmacia, it created an absolute pharmaceutical giant with $48 billion in revenue. By eliminating redundant positions, because let's face it, you don't need 2 chief financial officers, they saved huge amounts of money and perfectly pooled their research capabilities. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it brings our whole ice cream story full circle. What happens when a massive corporation wants to acquire you, but you flat out refuse to sell? Well, that triggers a hostile takeover. This is a super aggressive move where an acquiring company completely bypasses the founders and management and goes directly to the shareholders to buy up enough stock to force the acquisition anyway. And sadly for our ice cream heroes, that is exactly what happened to Ben & Jerry's. By the year 2000, the giant conglomerate Unilever wanted to buy the brand. Ben & Jerry fiercely resisted. They desperately wanted to maintain their independence and their really strict social mission focus. But remember that agency problem we talked about? The stockholders didn't care about the social mission nearly as much as they cared about the profits. Unilever swooped in and offered to buy the stock at almost twice its market price. The stockholders overwhelmingly voted yes, overriding the founders completely, and Unilever assumed control in a textbook hostile takeover. The story of Ben & Jerry really perfectly highlights the incredibly high stakes of business ownership. Their journey from a $5 correspondence course all the way to a globally recognized corporate brand acquired in a hostile takeover, it all started with that one decision to form a partnership. So I want to leave you with a thought about your own future endeavors. If you were starting a business tomorrow, knowing everything you know now, would you choose the total control of a sole proprietorship, the shared risk of a partnership, or the protected potential of a corporation?